Thanks for that introduction and good evening, everybody. I'll start by giving a very brief outline of the work which was carried out in the project and also a brief look at the progress of the work from 1995 until the year 2000. And I will follow on from that then with a look at the various elements of the project itself. Now we'll have a look at the next slide. Now, the work carried out consisted of the following. There was the main roof reconstruction, the renewal of all the floors, ceilings, internal plaster, doors and windows, the reconstruction of the choir gallery, the provision of toilets and an office for the Development Association, and the restoration of the stained glass windows. And apart from the external walls and the original external plaster, all other elements of the building required major reconstruction. Now we'll have a look at the work sequence from 1995 to 2000. In September 1995, work commenced on the main roof under the FOSS scheme. In 1996, the work continued on the roof and it was completed towards the end of that year. The old roof timbers were removed and the old timber floor was removed and a concrete subfloor was provided on hardcore. Towards the end of the year, work started on the ceilings, which consisted of insulation between the rafters. Metal riblab was nailed to the rafters, onto which 2 coats of lime mortar was applied. In 1997, work continued on the ceilings and remedial work was also carried out and the stonework to the front of the gable just below the church bell in order to remedy the penetration of dampness, and the bell support was also replaced. The reconstruction of the choir gallery progressed. The entire structure in fact was replaced except for the handrail and the timber beam under it, as well as 2 pillars. Steel joists and 9-inch by 2-inch timber joists were installed. Work commenced on the internal plastering of the walls, and this was a slow process as the walls were not vertical in many areas and lime mortar was used in the process. Preparation of the exposed timber roof trusses and the purlins for the application of fireproofing got underway. In 1998, the internal plastering of the walls continued. Treatment of the purlins and the roof trusses with 2 coats of fireproofing varnish got underway. This was a slow process in order to get an even covering. Work progressed on the provision of an office in the transept and the village side, or the Galway side if you like to call it that, of the church to facilitate the Development Association. The area overhead was planned as a meeting room and a storage facility for the association. In 1999, internal plastering continued. An insulated concrete floor was provided which incorporated electric cables for the heating system. Joinery work and the provision of kitchen also was nearing completion. In 2000, a temporary sewerage holding tank was provided between the front door and the main entrance gate. This functioned during the short period until the public sewerage scheme was provided, and it was emptied as required by Galway County Council. Steel railings were fitted in front of the first floor windows in the choir gallery and in the area over the Development Association office. The stained glass windows were repaired and installed and protected on the outside with shatterproof glass. Repairs to the entrance gate was completed and the 2 main pillars were raised about 4 inches to facilitate the raised ground level. And the fall scheme came to an end in April 2000. Now I'll now look at the various elements, or outline briefly the various elements of the project itself. I'll first of all deal with the history of the old church, then the FOSS scheme, and outline the members of the committee. Then I'll refer to the reconstruction of the roof, together with the renewal of the ceilings, the reconstruction of the choir gallery, the development of the Development Association office. The stained glass windows, I also refer to fundraising, sponsorship and grant awards, and finally with the designation of the old church as a branch library for Oranmore. We'll now go on to the next slide. This slide outlines the proximity of the graves to the church, and this limited access during the construction, as great care had to be taken in both the removal of materials and incorporating new materials in order to avoid damage to the nearby graves. Now, the site for the church itself was acquired in 1780 approximately, and the building was completed in 1803. During the night of the big wind in 1839, the roof was very damaged, but it was restored sometime after that. The main structure of the church is in the shape of a Celtic cross, and its roof design was noted for its fine carpentry by Maurice Craig in his book entitled The Architecture of Ireland. Now we'll have a look at the next slide. This slide outlines the plan of the old church as it was. The walls are coloured in blue, and the sacristy, which is at the back on the left, and the store, which was at the back on the right. Now, the overall internal width of the building across through transepts, which is the widest part, had a width of 65 feet approximately, and the internal depth from front to back was approximately 75 feet, and this gives a ground floor area of approximately 3,100 square feet. Now, at first floor level, which is the area which is shown coloured yellow, is the choir gallery, and this had an area of approximately 530 square feet. In the Galway County Council Development Plan from 1990 to 1995, the church was included in a list of, quote, buildings of architectural and historical interest for which it is an objective to secure their preservation. Now, the sacristy and the store, which are the two extensions at the back, were at a lower level and had lean-to slate roofs. Now, the new church was built in 1974 on a nearby site, and the old church was deconsecrated. The windows facing the road were boarded up at the time, and it was abandoned for the next 19 years, during which time it deteriorated significantly. The altar was removed prior to this by the parish priest and may have been installed in a church in County Clare. Around 1992, Mrs. Angela Kelly from the Mary Road took the initiative to hold a meeting in the Thatch Bar with a view to undertaking a restoration programme. Arising from this, the Old Church Restoration Committee was set up. From 1993 approximately to mid-1995, essential repairs were carried out to preserve the fabric of the building, and a lot of this work was done on a voluntary basis. In 1992, it was noted that the windows and doors to the back of the church were not boarded up, and people had easy access to the building. It appeared that beer parties had been held there, resulting in fire damage to the timber floor and extensive damage to the stained glass window, particularly the one at the back of the church. We'll now look at the damaged stained glass window. There you can see the extensive damage to it, and a lease was acquired from the diocesan trustees at this time. Now, an application was made for a fall scheme, and it was approved in 1995. FÁS was a training and employment authority established by the state in 1988, and it was run by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Approval for the scheme was granted in order to facilitate the training of apprentices in the various building construction trades such as carpentry, roofing, plastering, etc. And the foremen, tradesmen and apprentices were recruited and their wages were paid by FÁS. Now we'll have a look at the next slide, which is a photo. This is a photo of Mr. John Carlton from Kilkerran, Ballinasloe, and he was appointed foreman, and the team commenced work on the project in September 1995. John continued as foreman until the project finished in April 2000. He was an absolutely outstanding foreman, and as well as doing the necessary supervisory and paperwork, he worked on all the various elements of the job. And John Mahoney was the FÁS liaison officer. Now the actual work commenced at that time on the restoration of the roof. Now we'll go on now to the next slide, which outlines the committee members. Mrs. Angela Kelly was secretary and joint treasurer, and the committee members insisted that she be chairperson as well. Jerry Rabbit, who was our golf competition organiser. Noel Lean was of great assistance in organising the golf competitions with Jerry. John O'Shaughnessy, who was a senior executive with Coachan and a tremendous help as well. Elizabeth Burns was our solicitor to keep us on the straight and narrow. Pat Herity was a supervisor with the Office of Public Works, and he had considerable experience in the restoration of national monuments. Josie Cannon was always available with his tractor and trailer when needed. James McHugh, an architect who had a successful business practice in Oranmore, and Alex Finn, the well-known musician. And then myself, I acted as joint treasurer with Angela, and I also liaised with the FÁS scheme. Now, all our committee meetings were held in Oranmore Lodge, the courtesy of Brian and Mary O'Higgins. Now, as I mentioned, due to the proximity of the graves to the side of the church, access to the area for a tractor and trailer was not possible. It was, however, possible to erect scaffolding, but movement of materials had to be done by wheelbarrow or by hand. Now we'll go to the next slide, and this is a view of the ceiling, and it shows the roof trusses, and the darker colour one then is the old ceiling boards. Now the timber roof design, which was referred to by Maurice Craig, was noted for its fine carpentry. Now this related to the structure and support elements of the roof, consisting of the timber roof trusses and the timber valley structure as well. And these supported the purlins, which in turn supported the rafters, the slating lats and the quarry tiles. Now we'll have another clearer look at a roof truss just to give a better illustration of it. This is an illustration of a roof truss, which is shown coloured green, appears as the darker colour, and it is made from 6-inch by 12-inch timber and formed like the capital letter A. There are 9, I think we can go on now to the next one. This is the layout. You can see from here that there are 9 roof trusses. They're coloured dark green. There are 4 towards the front of the building, 2 on each transept on either side, and 1 towards the back, giving a total of 9. Now, at their base, they are embedded in the main walls to support them, and they in turn support the timber purlins and the rafters. The span between the walls is approximately 24 feet, and their approximate height over floor level is 32 feet. Now, the layout of the plan shows the location of the 6-inch by 12-inch timber beams forming the valley are shown coloured in red. These are also embedded into the main wall to support them and extend up to the same level as the roof trusses. Now, from the initial inspection, the timber roof trusses and the valley structure appeared to be in good condition. All the rafters and slating slats were decayed, as well as a large proportion of the purlins, and had to be replaced. Some timber trusses required to be reinforced with steel, where they were bedded into the main walls. One main valley beam was discovered to be decayed near its midpoint. We'll move to the next slide now to get a view of that. Now, this was not visible until the slates overhead were removed, and the decay on this piece of timber, which was 6 inches by 12 inches, it was not not visible, as I say, until the slates were removed. But the decay had started from the top side and had penetrated down and into the inner section, such that it was totally hollow inside. This is just a small section of a portion that was cut away. Now, to replace the overall 26-foot length of valley beam was not an option. The original length had sagged into the shape of a curve due to the time and weight, and it was also interconnected with other roof timbers, whereas a new replacement length would be straight. The lower defective section of the beam was cut out and replaced by a new 6 inch by 12 inch section and reinforced with steel plating. The steel plating was supplied by Steel Forms Limited, a steel fabrication company in Oranmore, which was run by Mr. Owen McCann, and it was fitted by the FAW scheme in a matter of days. The necessary section of new timber which was required was machined by Quilcha at Con, and it was ready for collection within 24 hours. The surrounding area of the roof had to be well supported during this operation in order to prevent any movement or sagging of the adjacent roof timbers. Now we'll go on to the next slide. This is a view of the roof over the transept on the village side, taken from outside the church as work was progressing on the roof. We'll also go on to the next slide. This is a view from the inside of the church, looking up towards the roof, and you can see the battered stained glass window in the background. And we'll also go on to the next slide. And this is an illustration of the reinforcement, the steel reinforcement, which was supplied by Steel Forms to splice the timber valley beam together, the new section with the old section. Now, the original slates on the roof were quarry slates, and they're ranged in length from about 36 inches to 24. And in order to reduce the weight of the roof and lessen the stress on the roof timbers, it was decided to use synthetic new slates instead. We'll go to the next slide now. Now, this gives a better view, clearer view of the roof trusses that I spoke about earlier, against the background of the new ceiling, which at this stage was completed. And we'll also have a look at the central section. The next slide. This is a view of the central section of the roof structure. Again, it's after the completion of the ceilings, which you can see. It gives a better illustration of them there. Now we'll go to the next slide now, and we'll deal with the ceilings. 2 coats of lime mortar were applied to a metal riblat nailed to the rafters, and the metal riblat is illustrated there on this slide. Preparation of the mortar mix was as follows. Hydrated lime was mixed with water in a barrel to form a thick paste, and it was left for at least 2 to 3 weeks. It was then mixed in a mixer with sand, and the sand, in fact, was actually all sieved by hand to make sure that there would be no particles that wouldn't get through the riblat. This mix was 9 parts of sand to 2 parts of the lime paste, and again it was left aside for about 2 to 3 weeks. And finally, 9 parts of this mix in turn was mixed with 1 part of white cement. And it was then discharged into a wooden box about 3 feet by 2 feet. And we'll show the next slide now. The mortar was discharged into this wooden box, and it was pounded with a timber mallet to extract from it. And this pounding of the mortar took about 5 minutes. And it was then ready, and only then, to be plastered onto the ceiling. We'll now look at the next slide. And the lower section there, you see the first course of plaster being applied onto the metal riblet. Now, the mortar plaster had the benefit of being able to absorb moisture and to release it in dry conditions. And the white cement yielded a stronger finish than the normal cement. This mortar also reduced the risk of cracking. Pat Heresy, who was on our committee, had 40 years experience with the Board of Works on restoring national monuments, and was our advisor regarding the mix. And then the next slide will show the finished plaster ceiling. There we have the illustration of the plastered ceiling, and it didn't actually require to be painted. Now, I'll now go on to the choir gallery. We'll have a look at the next slide. The floor gallery over the front door area consisted of 6-inch by 2-inch timber joists and flooring boards. All these were replaced, and they were replaced with 9-inch by 2-inch joists and new timber sheeting. A new steel girder, which is illustrated on this slide, was installed to support the joists over the front door end. And we'll go to the next slide to see where there was a steel channel was provided to enforce an existing timber support beam at the other end. And 2 pillars supporting these were also replaced. And the front timber railing, we go to the next slide now. The front timber railing was, the front timber railing was installed, and a handrail added at a higher level. Now here, I went a little bit quick there. We're now looking at the concrete floor area, and what you see here is the 5 inches of insulation laid on top of the subfloor. And concrete and this insulated floor was provided, which incorporated steel mesh reinforcement and electric cables to provide for underfloor heating. The system availed of night rate electricity, and the concrete acted as a storage heater, which released heat during the day as required. Now we'll say a little bit about the Development Association on the next slide. On this slide, you can see the development, the area over the Development Association offices at ground floor level, and the first floor level is also acts as a storage area for the Development Association office. And it was agreed with the County Council that the transept on the village side would be developed to include an office for the Development Association. And the remaining area of this transept would accommodate toilet facilities to which both the library and the Development Association would have access. And the access to this area that you see there at first floor level is by way of the stairs in the Development Association office at ground floor. Now, with regard to the sewerage development, for the entire duration of the project, the late Matty Carr of Cairns Bar permitted all personnel working on the church to use the toilet facilities in Cairns Bar. Now, this was a major benefit, and he would not accept any compensation for it. Also, he didn't want any acknowledgement for it either. In addition, it was more than desirable not to have any toilet facilities in any part of the site due to the proximity of the graves. In the short interval between the opening of the library and the provision of a new sewage scheme for Oranmore. A concrete storage tank of about 5,000 litres capacity for sewerage was provided near the entrance gate and was emptied by the County Council as required. This was an underground tank, I might mention as well. And regarding excavation for the tank and for drainage pipes, it was necessary for us to engage an archaeologist to supervise all the work in progress associated with that. We'll now look at the stained glass windows. This is the restored glass window at the back of the church over where the altar once stood. As I mentioned earlier, significant damage was done to the window, especially the one that you see here at the back of the church during the years that it was abandoned. Now, they were produced by mayors of Munich in Germany. It was a company which had an excellent international reputation. Now, the heritage officer for the county, Mr. James Harrod, described the windows, and I quote, "The jewel in Oranmore's crown and a substantial addition to the county's art portfolio," unquote. The restoration of the windows was carried out by Area Glass of Galway, and the quotation at the time was approximately £14,500. They were protected on the outside with shatterproof glass and were completed in the year 2000. And the proprietor of the company was a gentleman by the name of Richard Kimball. Now we'll have a look at the restored glass window on the transept on the Mary side. That's the next slide. And there we have a view of the restored glass window. That wasn't as badly damaged as the main window over the former altar position. I'll now talk about fundraising. Excuse me. The fundraising events which we had are as follows. We had two very successful raffles. There were 4 golf competitions. These were organised. The 4 were organised by Jerry Rabbit, and he was ably assisted by another golfer, Noel Lane. And there was also one organised in Milwaukee in the United States by the late John McGourty, who was a very good personal friend of Jerry Rabbit's. There was also an open day at Ross Castle in Mycullen. This was an event that was organised by Angela Kelly, who was a personal friend of the owners Elizabeth and George McLaughlin. This consisted of a range of activities, including an auction of items which were donated. And we also had a quite successful concert, and Sean O'Toole had a big input in organising it, and it was held in the Oranmore Lodge Hotel. Now I'll deal with the sponsorship. The appeal for sponsorship met with a tremendous response, and it came from the Irish American Partnership, local organisations, various business entities, and numerous individuals. There were too many here for me to actually mention them out individually. The Irish American Partnership was the largest sponsor, having donated $30,000 between 1996 and 1997. It is a non-profit organisation committed to advancing educational opportunities and community development projects in Ireland, both north and south. Now, one of its many fundraising events is organising golf competitions in the United States. Contact with the organisation was led by the Honourable Mr. Jerry Rabbit again. Now, a few Americans arrived to play golf at Galway Bay Club in Renville. Jerry was contacted by Ronnie Coonahan to join them. And one of the group was the late John McCourty, a very successful businessman from Milwaukee, who organised some golf competitions in Milwaukee to raise funds for the Irish American Partnership. Jerry told John about the old church restoration project, and he suggested it might be considered for a contribution. And through John McGourty's influence, the donation was made. Now, we also got grants and awards. We got a grant from Galway County Council, the Heritage Council grant, and a grant from the Department of the Environment. And there was two awards given. One was the Trustee Savings Bank Award, and there was also the Millennium Trust Award. Now, there is a plaque, an acknowledgement plaque, erected by the, we see it here now on the next slide. It's erected by the Restoration Committee to acknowledge the main contributors to the project. And as well as all that money, we sold some of the old slates and lead to the Office of Public Works, and we sold some timber panels to an antique golf dealer in Gort. Now, there were other forms of sponsorship. We can't put a value on them because we don't know, but we'll refer to them as sponsorship in kind. There was permanent road restoration work carried out following the excavation in the public road for the new connection to the public water main. This was done by Colchan and supervised by John O'Shaughnessy, who had a team ready on the spot to do the restoration as soon as the excavated trench was backfilled. The supply of tiles came from the Tile Superstore in Oranmore. We had the use of the toilets in Cairns Bar for the force workers for the entire duration of the scheme. There was also Matt Lohan from Oranmore, supplier of some joinery works. Alex and Leona Finn supplied some scaffolding. George and Elizabeth McLaughlin gave the use of Ross Lake Castle grounds for the open day event. Steel Farms in Oranmore gave assistance with the steel fabrication for the roof structure. And we had the use of tractor and trailer from both Josie Cannon and sometimes Michael Monaghan. And we had the use of the meeting rooms at the Oranmore Lodge, courtesy of Brian and Mary O'Higgins. And we had an endless supply of stationery and all the associated costs, stamps, phone calls and everything else from Angela and the late Joe Kelly. Now, we'll now look at one area which was a little bit of a problem area at the next slide. And we're looking here at the small bell tower over the entrance to the church. And the problem we had here was that you can see it was vulnerable to the winds and the rain from every direction, the back, the front, the sides, etc., with the result that there was dampness getting in. And to remedy the dampness to the front gable, scaffolding had to be erected and the mortar joints in sections of the exposed timber had to be raked out and cleaned. And a grout consisting of 6 parts of what we call fly ash to 1 part of lime had to be injected into the joints to penetrate well in. And these joints were later pointed with a lime mortar mix. Now, fly ash was used because it is a very, very fine ash residue from coal, which is burned at a very high temperature at the ESB power station in Moneypoint in County Clare. And Pat Herity, from his experience with the Office of Public Works, advised us on this solution, and again, it was successful. With regard to accounts and that, our committee prepared detailed accounts relating to the project every 3 months, and they were submitted for approval to the Development Association itself. And I may have overlooked to mention that the Old Church Restoration Committee was in fact a subcommittee of the Development Association. And with regard to health and safety, at the start of the project we were obliged to have a health and safety statement prepared, and this was commissioned and complied with regard to all aspects of the work. Now, the use of the old church as a branch library, I particularly like to refer to this. The initial objective of the committee was to restore the roof. Arising from the success of the FOSS scheme, it was decided to continue restoration work as far as possible. and hopefully find an appropriate use for the building. Various options were considered, and the suggestion by Angela Kelly to use it as a library was met with unanimous approval in 1996. Angela met with Mr. Pat McMahon, the county librarian, and discussed the proposal with him. Pat was very supportive of the concept, and he made a favourable submission to the Department of the Environment, because approval of the department would be necessary for the establishment of a branch library in the church. There was a coalition government in power at the time, and we made representations to both the government minister and TD. The outcome, however, was disappointing, as we were told that we were third on the priority list, since Loughrea and the west side of the city were ranked ahead of Oranmore. In 1997, a general election came about and there was a change of government. Frank Furey B.E. was appointed Minister for State, and we immediately made representation to him and emphasised that restoration was progressing well and that an early decision was important. He took the issue up personally with Noel Dempsey, the Minister for the Environment, who visited the old church while on a visit to Galway, and the designation of a branch library was sanctioned by the department in April 1998. Now we look at the next slide to give, this gives an outline, I hope, of the layout of the library. The ground floor. The library area is shown coloured yellow. The development office is shown coloured red to the left and the front. The toilets are shown to the back of that coloured green. And the store area, which was the former sacristy, is shown coloured brown. And the kitchen area to facilitate the library staff is shown coloured blue. In 1999, Galway County Council appointed James McHugh, our architect, to prepare the layout plan for the library, Development Association and toilets, and also to prepare a specification and supervise the work necessary to meet the Council's requirements for the library. And such work included the following: the installation of electric power, lighting, heating, ventilation, telephone, internet, computer network, cabling, and protective services such as fire alarm and lightning conductors. In addition, hot and cold water distribution and general plumbing and wastewater was included. Required furnishing included shelving, seating, tables and a reception desk. And I might mention that the heating design was done by a local company, Heavy Kenny Associates. We'll now go to the next slide and we look at, in the background there, you get you can see at first floor level the choir gallery area, and this is now used as a store area by the library. In fact, they installed 4 computers with internet connections to which members of the library were granted free access. This facility had to be booked in advance with the librarian, and use by members was restricted to 1 hour per day in order to cater for the demand. We'll now go to the next slide. This is now a view of the library area facing the main stained glass window, and on the left hand side you can see the library reception area. So that gives, and in the background you can see that there's a store stained glass window. Now a lease of the church was granted to Galway Council, and we were so pleased to get the library that it was granted at a nominal rent, I think, of something like €1 per year. And the official opening of the library took place in January 2001 by Mr. Noel Dempsey, who was the Minister for Environment and the Heritage Council. I'd like to move to the next slide. This is a photo of the late John McGourty from Milwaukee, who was responsible for the $30,000 sponsorship which we got from the Irish-American Partnership. And I wish also to acknowledge that the FOSS scheme was key to the successful development of the project, and the FOSS construction team were outstanding. And they were each equally skilled at carpentry, slating, plastering and tiling. I also wish to salute Jerry Rabbit for his success in organising the golf competitions and for liaising with the late John McGourty and also with the Irish-American Partnership. Now I'll move on to the next slide. This is a photo of Angela Kelly with her late husband Joe. I believe that the project would never have been undertaken were it not for Angela Kelly promoting the proposal in 1992. And if it was not undertaken then, it is very likely that the building would have collapsed by now, resulting in considerable damage. Her dedication to the project is best illustrated by a reply which she gave to the late Bishop Eamon Casey when he told her in 1992 that the diocese would not be able to afford to continue paying the insurance premium on the vacant building, and that it would have to be demolished. Angela looked him straight in the eye and she said, "It will be done over my dead body." Now, they both, Angela and Joe, they did considerable research on the history of the church, and the late Joe, God rest him, kept us supplied with photographs throughout for our submissions and applications for grants and so on. Now, I'd like to refer to an incident that happened with regard to the conservation grant administered by the Department of the Environment. I was coming out from the old church one day in 1999, and I met Mary O'Connor, Mary Fred as we call her, on her way into the graveyard. Now, Mary lives at the end of the lane which adjoins the graveyard on the village side, and she said that the first thing she sees every morning when she opens the door is the damaged stained glass windows and the unsightly, rusty and broken protective metal mesh over it. She inquired if and when we could repair it. I explained that it was an element of the project that would have to be done as soon as we could finance it. And she said, "Well, why don't you ask Frank Furey, the Minister for State?" Well, I said to her that when we were looking for to have the church designated as a library, we were very successful in lobbying Frank Furey to have it done. And when it was granted, I said, "Mary, that was the answer to all my prayers." And I said, "I haven't the nerve to go lobby him again for more money." But I said, "You can if you like, Mary." A few days later, she got on the phone to say that she had contacted Frank and that I was to meet him in his office the following Saturday morning. I did so and was instructed by him to make an application for the new conservation grant scheme which was announced and administered by the Department of the Environment. Our application was successful and in due course the grant was paid. I would like to pay tribute now at this stage to Cohen Holdings Limited of Oranmore. That was the company. They gave us a tremendous success in the supply of all the building materials. And on behalf of the Restoration Committee, I wish to thank all those who contributed in so many ways to the success of the project. Now finally, since this project was carried out between 20 and 25 years ago, errors and omissions are quite likely in what I have said, and it may also be due to the fact that I'll be 87 years old later on this year. And that concludes, I think, all I have to say about the restoration of the old church. Thank you.